Well, good evening. I'm so happy to see the sellout audience up here, and also to those of you watching on YouTube and enjoying this rather extraordinary hour in time. I, for one, am tremendously nervous. Much easier to sing than to sit in this company, but it's such truly an immense honor to be in conversation tonight with Dame Janet Baker. Hello.
Hello. Again.
Hello again. So pardon me if I talk very fast, but of course we have a lot I think we want to talk about. But considering the fact that now in a few hours or tomorrow, this conversation will be on YouTube, and my family in Kansas City can watch it, young singers in Columbia or Bristol or Toledo, Ohio can click on it and watch two mezzos share some repertoire in common, to watch us talk in conversation. This is a very different world than when you were singing and in your height of powers as a singer. What do you make of this, of YouTube and this internet world? Let's start there.
I'm the wrong generation. I think it's very exciting. I remember something you said once some time ago about widening and broadening the aspect of people being able to reach out to people, and this, I think, is probably the most exciting thing about it, is that we can do precisely that, reach a lot of people at the same moment, and it's terrifying, but it's a very exciting sort of communication.
Do you worry that some of the art is lost because it's such quick access and people can see it without much investment? You used to have to read the libretto, now there's surtitles. You used to have to study and prepare for an event at the opera because it was so rare and unique. And now it's click. Oh, how does that aria compare to this one and that one? And do you worry about that at all?
Yes, I do. I think it's surface. And it's fine, maybe as an introduction, but there must come the moment when the thing that takes place at a particular time, music is now. It's a moment of now, and hopefully always will be. The rest is wonderful. Recording, all that sort of thing, I think is a marvelous thing to, again, reach out to people. But there is no substitute for wool, so to speak. You have to do the work yourself in order to get something of the flavor of the work we put into it, and all the musicians put into it. It can't be a surface thing forever, because that deprives an audience, I suppose, of the deepest experience they can have.
And that's why we do this.
Yes, the deepest experience we can have. That's what we work for, isn't it?
It was, somebody asked me, I was doing a interview, and somebody asked me, what do you say to somebody young today who's interested in the opera but a bit intimidated about it? And I'd love to know your reply to that.
It follows on from what we've just been talking about. It depends on the approach of the individual. It's work, that there are certain core values that I think every generation wants to pass on to the next, and not only in music, that nothing is achieved without tremendous work. And anything that gets in the way of that, or anything less than the hardest work we can do, it isn't good enough for the composer and the poet, and it's not good enough for the audience either. It's got to go really deep. And I think that's something that will always be necessary, regardless of what happens to the profession in the future, or to any other endeavor we attempt. We want to be the best we can at it. It's very important.
I think for me, when opera works, it's when everybody involved has put in that work and they've challenged themselves to go deep. and when the audience has done the work as well and opened to that kind of an experience, then somehow it takes flight in a way that nothing else does. And we're immersed in something that is showing us the best of humanity. So I grew up in Kansas. I told you this before the last time we spoke, went to Wichita State University to be a music teacher. So I thought that was my calling and my vocation. And I got sidetracked by this opera thing. And you were one of the I'm still sidetracked, we'll see. But you were really, truly one of the very first singers I heard on record. Maybe CDs had just started coming in, but it wasn't YouTube. I had to listen to the LP and take out the recording because you sang some of the same repertoire that I was working on. And it became immediately clear that, as you said, surface would not cut it. Because I was listening to what you did with the line and the text, which at that time I didn't understand German at all, but I knew what you were doing was right, and that it wasn't diction, but that you had gone deeply into the poetry, into the text, something I know was paramount for you as an artist. And that challenge thrilled me. And I have to hope that for the other generations that are coming up as well, that challenge ignites something in them that makes them go and work and translate and go deep into the poetry.
I think you're right about the art form of opera, that it can be the most fulfilling for us and for the audience. It's sublime because it asks everything of art, doesn't it? Visual, audio, spiritual, physical, technical. They all have to be right, and it's very, very difficult to get all those things right. I think sometimes I find it hard to accept a lot of the new visual ideas which don't spring from the musical ideas and from the poet. I would find that as a performer very difficult to cope with. If somebody asked me to do something physically or put an idea into my mind that I found didn't go with the music, I would be in difficulty.
Mm-hmm.
But as an art form, it asks everything of everybody in a way that nothing else does. I agree.
It is a challenge today in some circumstances, and I think as an audience member, I've been in the audience, and even though I'm trying to understand it and I'm saying, come on Joyce, you're intelligent, you should get this, I look and what I'm seeing is at such odds with what I'm hearing. The brain has a chasm that's difficult to jump over, and I think I'm going to get in so much trouble for saying this, but if that's the future of our art form, it doesn't deserve to exist. It just doesn't. It just doesn't. It doesn't make sense. However, it's a living, breathing art form that I don't think we should live in a museum with it.
Right.
And artists, including stage directors, need the liberty to experiment and need the elbow room to try things. Not everything is going to work. And I've been in productions where I saw the designs and I went, oh, no way. And I went into it and it worked. And other ones where the first day they talk a lot and I say, okay, and we go into it and there's nothing. And then it's up to us to try and fill in blanks of a tapestry that just is empty. I still believe we need, and this is partly the onus of the audience as well, we have to be willing to let people try and fail. Singers as well. If you take on a new role for the first time, it might not be the best fit. We need the room to fail.
Yes.
But it's tricky when it becomes the norm and when the purpose seems to be to make a statement rather than serve the story. And that's where I get into trouble.
That's the danger, but we have safeguards, and that is the score, which cannot be tampered with. Neither should the libretto be tampered with if that is how it was set to music. And to work within those boundaries is all we need, really. I think you can experiment with safety as long as those two factors are very well to the forefront of everybody's mind. They are given, in other words. Somebody once said to me when I was going to do Maria Stuarda, what a silly woman. And I thought, that's a shame. Historically, she was very different, but I wasn't singing history's Maria Stuarda. It was Donizetti's idea, and the fact of she coming from a Roman Catholic viewpoint that made her real to me in a way which was very important to my belief in the role.
Speaking of, should we look at a brief clip of this?
Yes.
I would personally love to. This is the Act 1 entrance aria of your historic and role-defying portrayal of Mary Stuart at the English, no? Is it the English
National Opera.
Do you still listen to your recordings?
No, not if I can help it.
No. Really?
Yeah, no.
If I were you, I would listen to them all the time. It must be slightly bittersweet, or is it?
It's that. It's that you are presented with the performance as it actually is, and not as you thought it was or hoped it was. It's always slightly different and never satisfactory, really.
I understand that.
I'm sure you do.
I don't listen to mine, and if I'm doing a recording and I get the first edit, it's the most torturous hour and a half, and it's awful.
Yes.
Because you can't change anything.
That's right.
And all you hear is what you want to do better.
That's right.
But actually, I talked with Jake Heggie, the composer, one time, and I said, do you wish you could go back in time and fix things and rewrite? He said, yes, but then I have to step back and realize that's the fingerprint of me at that moment in my life, of where I was as a composer, a musician.
Very good.
And that's helped me make my past recordings slightly more palatable.
Lovely.
Yeah.
I want to take you up on something you said a moment ago about definitive performance. I think for that reason you've just said, that comes out of the moment, there's no such thing. Because although we've got the same bones of structure, we've got the same words and music to sing, I think this is a marvelous thing about performing, that you cannot be like anybody else. So whatever you do, it is totally unique at that time, for all sorts of different reasons. And you can't help but put your personality or your own imprint on it, because you are you. And the more you are you, the more unique it will be. But if you're a performer of integrity, the more true it will be to the composer and the words. There's no such thing as definitive.
Yes, I know what you mean. From the outside, though, you can look and you say, that's an ideal. That's, I look at that and I say, that is so true to the composer. It's so true to the character. It's so well deployed that maybe definitive is not the best word, but that's the goal. That's where the bar is now. Yes. So here I am coming behind, and now I know where the bar is. And that's exciting. And that's, I think, one of the beautiful things of the legacy of opera singers from composers and singers is that those are the threads that we pass to one another, and we take up and we learn and we give to the next one, because we're really not many generations removed from the singers that debuted these parts, really, in reality. We don't have them on YouTube, but we have the performing tradition, which is exciting. And to follow on what you said about bringing yourself to the part with respect to the composer, if you do that, if you know who you are and you free yourself to do that, then the temptation to compete with those ghosts of the past starts to disappear. Because that's an extraordinary burden on singers.
Of course it is.
Is the audience member saying, oh, Janet Baker's Maria, or Maria Callas in this house, you know, her Tosca. It's a onersome burden to carry.
Yeah, absolutely, and shouldn't be there.
No.
Because we're all looking for the truth, and we maybe see it in slightly different ways, but as you say, we are aiming for the same goal. But it's bound to be different because we're all different.
Yes.
Slightly.
When do you think you gave your best performances?
Oh.
I mean, and not specific, but what do you think some of the factors were where you...
It's this magic thing, isn't it, that eludes us and yet sometimes descends on us, that we all feel. And that it's something over which we have no control. Everything is right. The things we know about, maybe we've done the proper work and we've got wonderful colleagues around us and everything is right. But it's still on a human level. The pivotal moments, I think, descend from somewhere else when the magic happens, or the gift which we're given is expressed in a way that is only made possible for it if we do the right things, if we have everything in order. That's the human thing. But the magic is out of our control and descends or not as it will.
That is so true. We can't force it,
no.
But we have to prepare the way for it.
That's right.
So may I reference, now I speak about this to young singers, I've written about it, I talk about it all the time, and I think I always credit you. That's my intention anyway. Would you talk about the glass? Because I asked Dame Janet one time about how she looked at being a singer and the power of music. And this is, for me, the greatest description of what it is to be a singing artist, an artist who happens to sing.
I use the word glass out of the spur of the moment, and as I think about it, a glass is not a mirror. It's something you do not see yourself in. You look through it at something else, either the audience or at the responsibility which you have to the composer and the librettist. You've got to keep the glass clean. You've got to be able to see out to that purpose, which is bigger than you are, and you've also got to allow people to look in, so that there is a sense of nakedness, actually. It's a very brave thing to do, to stand up in front of people, isn't it? And bare your soul. It's not the sort of place that's usually done, and yet that is what we're required to do. That kind of responsibility is enormous, and one can't expect it to be perfect. We can't keep the glass clean all the time, but that's what I think performing is about. That you are serving something much, much more important and bigger than you are, and yet you have an important role to play. So we have to keep the glass clean.
I love that. Young singers out there listening, rewind that part. And when you get to this part of the second time, rewind it again. Transcribe it and write it down, because it's what I love about that analogy is, and you've enhanced it tonight, thank you. You said at the beginning too that you want to become transparent like a glass, so that the emotion and the music can pass through unhindered. But the work of keeping a glass clean is endless, and you never, as soon as it's clean, there's a speck of dust. Yeah. Or it looks clean from this angle, and then the light shines and you say, oh, it's full of smears. Oh, I've got to get that. Sure. It's diction, it's technique, it's breath control, it's the psychology of the character, it's the musical intentions of the artist, it's the vocal technique itself. It's really endless, because this is always shifting and changing. But at the end of the day, that idea of disappearing and allowing that two-way vision, I think there's so few people that are able to achieve that. And it's been remarkable to hear you explain it, because that's the thing I think we always experience in listening to you and watching, is you were in service of the emotion and the composer and the text. And when the artistic standard is held to that level, and with beauty of expression, then I don't worry about the industry. I don't worry about anything, because that's something that bypasses intellect and contemporary productions or traditional productions. It just goes to the heart.
Right. But remember that your generation has the same opportunity, and you, as a member of that generation, epitomize it. All the things you've talked about are exactly what you do. So you are already passing that standard on to other singers in the most remarkable and generous way, and in your own way. The width of your repertoire and the way you communicate whatever it is you're singing, even over the rainbow, you know. I've often wondered, is that our fach, to use a classically trained voice in any kind of music? If we're talking about the future, maybe this is one of the ways that will develop, in that we won't be so afraid of getting up and singing something out of our fach. Do you find, in fact, that singing, how shall I put it, non-classical music affects your technique? Doesn't appear to.
Not under certain circumstances. If I'm doing more contemporary American songbook type pieces, Somewhere Over the Rainbow or Cole Porter, these things, and it's in a piano recital, I sing it with the same technique I would approach Handel, or it's a matter of expansion sometimes, because singing Massenet is slightly different than Handel or Rossini or Arlen. But if it's with a big orchestra, then I'll ask to be amplified, because those are big, lush orchestrations, and I don't want to have to push the voice, because it requires not a fully formed, unamplified sound that we need in opera, but it requires a delicate use of the text and of the voice.
Very good point.
but I wouldn't, because if I need to go over an 80-piece orchestra, I'm going to sing in a very different way than I would.
What exactly? How is it different?
I think it's such a good question. I would consider it a question of how much accelerator I use, how much gas pedal I use. Mm-hmm. So if I'm singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow with a big orchestra, it gets quite big in the middle. I would have to go like as if I was singing Charlotte or something. I'd need my full breath, my full connection, full engagement of everything. If I'm doing it with a microphone, I can come off the gas a lot. I'm still singing supported. I'm not changing placement or the connection to the breath. I've just taken the foot off the gas.
Right. There's an advert. It's a man singing who sounds a lot like Frank Sinatra. And it's a mile away from what Frank Sinatra did with, the hesitation, the kind of thing he did within a bar, the rhythm that we're not allowed to do because as classically trained singers, we have to obey the notes. Is this something to do with it? Do you have a more relaxed attitude towards where the actual notes are placed in the bar when you're singing this kind of thing? Is it more left to you because you can time it as you want to, like he did, of course. He was master at it, wasn't he?
He was a master. And Ella Fitzgerald, the same. The bending of the notes, that you don't always have to be spot on the middle of the note. Right. The pitch he plays with, bending over the bar line effortlessly, and also the use of the vibrato when it comes in, comes out. I think those are all things they played with. And we're not allowed to do that as opera singers.
No.
And it's thrilling to have that kind of freedom. I'll give you another example. I had the weirdest experience of my life in February. Stay tuned, because you'll hear more about it. But I filmed a docudrama on the life of Florence Foster Jenkins. Seriously. Yeah. And part of the conceit of the film is actually quite interesting, because there's the theory that she had syphilis, and that it drastically affected her hearing, which is why she would listen to herself and think, I sound good. Quite the opposite of what I do when I listen to myself. And they think actually she had severe hearing damage. Oh, Lord. But boy, did she love to sing. And her dream was to be a very famous singer. And at the end of the day, she is. So part of the conceit of the film is that what if we portray her as she imagined herself to sound like? So part of the time I'm singing classically as I would myself. But then part of the time I had to go off the rails. And not in a Somewhere Over the Rainbow kind of way. I mean, really off the rail. And it was so hard, not so much to make funny sounds, but to be off rhythmically.
Right.
That was so, because for decades now, we're trained to perfection and exacting technique. And it was this idea of, as I listened to her, I thought, most of the time she was really close. She almost got it. And then she'd miss it spectacularly. Yeah. But for most of the time, she was quite nearly there. So it was a matter of being almost right, and then lunging. And as it took me a little bit to do it, and I was also doing it live on the set. It was we didn't pre-record the bad singing. And I had to get rid of, talk about naked glass. Woo! And I would laugh sometimes at what came out. But once I gave into it and gave myself permission, the freedom of not worrying about being perfect. You should try it tomorrow when you take a shower. sing in the shower, just see what it feels
Sure.
like. It's liberating and wonderful. And I need to be careful that it doesn't sneak too much into my everyday job. But it was that reminder of, you know, the toddlers that get pans and wooden spoons and bang. They're not worried about being in rhythm or being correct. They're making music.
Yeah.
They're enjoying it. And I think that is an element that sometimes gets bleached out in the training system for singers. There's, rightly so, there has to be an emphasis on perfection. We're dealing with Mozart,
Exactly.
Bach, Handel,
Exactly.
Massenet. So we have to serve that and reach for that height. But if we take away the imagination, if we take away the sense of improvisation at the same time, this, I think, can't come in until you have such a solid
Exactly.
training block.
You can't do it the other way around, can you?
No, no. But we have to come back to that
Yes.
and that sense of play, so that when we arrive on the stage, it seems that we're composing on the spot and improvising.
That's right.
If I can talk a little bit again about the young singers and colleagues, part of the social media world today, so I think the Royal Opera House tweeted that this conversation was happening, and in 2 seconds, the divine Alice Coote sends me a message. I hate you! I'm so jealous! I hate you! Give her a big hug for me! Joyce! Hi, Alice. So she sends her love. We have another clip, also from the Royal Opera House, and it's a Massenet clip, tying into Werther, but it's with Alice and I. And I know you're not you don't want to be flattered, but it is unmistakable, this legacy of going from one singer to the next. It's undeniable the effect that you have had, not only on singers, but on mezzo-sopranos. And I know Alice in particular, being from the UK, and we talk about you so much, not only with Alice, but my other mezzo colleagues. Jamie Barton is very upset that she has to be on stage tonight and can't be here. But on behalf of us, it's important that I just want you to know how grateful we are, because you do set that bar wonderfully high. And in that way, all of your art lives. And it lives in us, and we try and honor it and make it our own and take it to the next place that we're supposed to take it. But you have made our journey so rich and wonderful. So this is Alice and I in Cendrillon, Love at First Sight.
You sound to me as though you've got a piece of elastic running from your head to your feet, and every note is on the piece of elastic to stretch whichever way you like. It's incredible, absolutely.
Oh.
Like elastic.
Thank you.
True.
Sometimes the elastic snaps. That's the problem.
Not yet. No.
Oh, thank you. It was really a special thing to be able to do that piece, because it's a bit of a niche piece, and
Gorgeous.
It's a feel-good piece. It's not a tragedy. The Royal Opera House. What does this mean to you, the theater?
Well, it's home. Not my musical home, but it's the great house of this country. And it's a very frightening thing, I think, for British singers to sing here because of that feeling of home ground. I don't know if you feel like this about American opera houses, but there's something special about performing in your own country, which isn't replicated quite anywhere else. So it means that I don't think it's all that easy a house to sing in. It's a long tunnel as opposed to the Colosseum, which is wide, completely different feel. And the two things, as I have known them over the years, are also very different in the early days. I would like to think that English National Opera was precisely that, and that it was the nurturing place for young British singers. It is not as much as it should be. And also the fact of English being a foreign language. It's wonderful to do a role in its original language, like singing Bach and then singing a translation of Bach. It's never the same. So to sing something in this house, in its original language, is very special. Notwithstanding, when I used to go to ENO as an audience member and going to the ladies' cloakroom in the middle of the show, there would usually be people talking about it, of course, and then saying, I just can't hear a word they say. They're singing in our language, and I can't hear a word they say. And I was longing to tell them, you will never hear any language the same way as your own language spoken, because of this terrible problem of music covering up consonants. People don't understand, okay, so in English they may get a little bit more than they do from Russian if they don't speak it at all, but there's always this problem of translation and expecting, because we're singing in our own language, that it should be clearer. Why should it? We're singing over 85 other musicians.
And often in ranges that we can't be so true to the
so
text.
Unfair. So to sing, well, it's like singing Bach in German is much easier and much somehow of a piece than singing in a foreign language. So that too, you know, one gets authenticity here, and a sense of it being a world stage, not just a London stage. This is one of the world's great opera houses, and all that weighs on you, I'm sure, doesn't it? As you're standing there. Yeah.
Yes. This is one of the theaters that you go into and the ghosts are still there.
Sure.
And it's inspiring and intimidating,
Yeah.
I think, at the same
Yeah.
time. You, in looking at younger singers today, this is something that interests me a lot, is a younger audience and younger singers. Those are, a younger audience is sort of the holy grail of everybody's looking to get more young people into the audience. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that, and then kind of advice for the singers coming up now.
Well, one of the things you spoke about earlier was communication in the modern way. Okay, maybe on the surface, but that surface approach is very important to beckon people in. So it's very valuable and necessary. I think with anything that's going to affect you deeply, and music does, doesn't it? It affects us all in a very particularly deep way. You've got to keep core values of the past. As you said, to build something secure. And on top of that, like crossing over safely, is going to be, I think, more of a thing of the future. And you were talking also about microphone. This interests me a lot because, of course, it's used a lot in musical theatre, and necessarily so. I think the way people speak, the way they do not project, the way they do not speak normally, clearly, is a terrible retrograde step. And to learn how to sing language is a particular trick, if you like. That sort of thing has to be mastered in a way that makes us intelligible, and we also need conductors like the maestro of this house who can make an orchestra sound like an orchestral score and leave room, which he did so marvelously well for you the other night. Bringing things down without the loss of the whole musical experience. He is a genius at that, and as a singer working with that, you must feel that so supporting. So they've got to build strong techniques, and then on that foundation use anything that happens in the future in order to spread the word, so to speak. But really and truly, it comes down to working on a score, making sure that before they go onto a stage, they know the work absolutely backwards, because as soon as you take a step forward on the stage, everything you've learned goes out of the window, doesn't it?
Yes,
It disappears. You could know it like the back of your hand. Make a step, don't know it. Of course, that changes. But it's frightening, the way the concentration goes onto a production, and immediately you forget. You put them together again afterward in a little while, one hopes. But that kind of thing they've got to be adept at. All those things are of the past. The diction, and the work, and the not singing too much. All these are old.
And none of those things come quickly.
No.
None of those things are immediate. And I think we live in an immediate world today. It's instant. Everything is instant. Instagram.
Yes.
And I look at young singers and they're frustrated because they can't get it. I was frustrated too. I'm still frustrated on some elements of the things I can't get yet. But it's for conductors as well. You know, there's this push. He's a star conductor at 23, or she's a star conductor at 23. And what makes Tony so great is he was a star piano bar player at 23, playing for voice lessons and voice lessons and voice lessons and voice lessons, and assisting and learning it from the inside out. But that's not a quick route. And for singers, you don't go into a language, unless you're a savant of some kind, quickly. The road for this kind of artistry is slow and steady, and it doesn't come at 24, rarely. Or if it comes at 24, it usually isn't sustained till about 27. I have a friend who said, you're either famous before you're 30 or after you're 30. And I thought, well, that might have some truth to it. But I think that idea of patience, and with respect to the past, knowing the kind of legacy and the kind of masterpieces that you're daring to enter into, it's a long-term goal. But today's thing, you know, you want to be a star. At 26, you want to be a star. And you want to get out there and go. And I think this is something I saw in you. It's something I can't say ever was an ambition of mine, is to be famous or to be a star of some kind. That's never, it's been the music, it's been the work.
And look what happened. You changed your technique at a very important time in your life. This was such a brave thing to do, to rethink at that
26
point.
to 29, when a lot of my friends were getting covers at the Met and leading roles at City Opera and all this. And it wasn't coming together for me. And I stopped and I said, okay, let's revamp. I got naked with that glass, and I was really bad for about 1.5 years because my teacher was taking away all the mechanism that I was using to sing.
Amazing.
And it was, it was the best thing that could have happened.
Except that it was an extremely difficult decision to make, of humility and clarity of purpose. Can I ask you if you were aware of a calling or a destiny, a sense of purpose from being very young? Because you must have had something very tough inside you to survive that. Were you aware of it as a very young person?
Well, yes. Yes, so I grew up in a Catholic family, and a very dedicated Catholic parents. My father was the volunteer church choir director, my mother was the organist. And I would sit up in the choir loft before I was old enough to get into his adult choir. And he was doing Palestrina and Bird and Bach, and I was like, one day I'll make it into the St. Anne's Church choir. We had monthly confessionals on the family calendar. I went to daily mass from kindergarten to 8th grade. I mean, there was a lot of I am not worthy, I am not worthy, I am not worthy in my formative years. But we would sit around the table and we talked about vocation and what it is to have a life of service. We talked about other things as well, but vocation was always there. And so I think part of it was out of duty, if I'm honest. I thought, okay, I have to find the right vocation. Better be good, I better do the right thing. And I think a lot of it was that kind of earnest sense to make my parents happy and to do the right thing, what was expected of you. And I hit this chasm in college, at university, when I was finishing my education, my music education degree, and I was in the classroom doing my student teaching, my practicum. And I was in really low-income schools. And I saw things that I wasn't prepared to see. First graders dealing with sexual abuse and, parents strung out on drugs, and the kids still coming to school every day, smelly and without anything. And so here was this idea of vocation, and I'm thinking, at the same time, I've been doing opera on the side, sidetracked by opera, and I'm loving it. And I'm feeling at home on the stage. But this idea of this weight of vocation, looking at all the need in the classroom and going, but this is obviously where I'm needed. Because look at these kids, and they need good teachers in the classroom. And I was really torn, and this was probably 22. I was probably around 22 years old. And I talked to my dad. And I said, Dad, I don't know what to do. Because also at this time, I was not a star singer by any stretch of the imagination. I was singing Kate Pinkerton as opposed to Cherubino in university. I was cast as Marcellina in Figaro, not Cherubino. So they put me in and I was getting some stage experience, but it wasn't like I was on this trajectory so that there was any secure career path by choosing opera. It was quite the opposite. But my father said, Joyce, there's more than one way to educate people, and there's more than one way to touch them, and there's more than one way to reach them. And Dad, he gave me the greatest gift, because he pointed me the way of doing what I think I'm meant to do, at least for the moment, and giving me the freedom without being chained to the guilt of, but the schoolroom, maybe I should be there. He freed me, but from that moment, instead of it being kind of a duty, I took that on and I said, okay, but I want it to mean something. I don't want to just have a spotlight on me and hit the high note. It doesn't interest me. I'd like to hit the high note, but that doesn't interest me. And it's always, I think it's why I seek out the deeper part of what this art can do.
Yes, what you do.
Well,
Marvelously.
thank you. But it's that's where that comes from. Yeah. And I think it allows me to enjoy what I do more because the pressure isn't just the spotlight. I don't give that so much import. I think as I do what I think what I think this art form can do as a whole, and I sort of join my forces to that. Yeah. But it's also why I have less and less tolerance for our industry. I see a lot of apologizing going on in it. I see a lot of this, well, I mean, we're old-fashioned and we're out of date, and we've got to be relevant and all this stuff. I thought, we are relevant. We're the most relevant thing on the planet. We're talking about love and death and life and tragedy. How could we possibly be more relevant? It's just people don't know that. And I would love to see the industry as a whole actually own what we are and who we are and go from that place of power rather than going, you know, the poor stepchild in the back of the corner going, well, I know I'm not Broadway and I know I'm not cinema, but can I come to the table? I'd much rather that we own exactly what we are and scream it from the mountaintops.
As individuals, I'm sure this is your experience as well, as individuals walking in the street in normal day, the rapport between a perfect stranger coming up to you and telling you in clear terms exactly what you've meant to him or her as a musician, that of course we do get, and that kind of feedback I think is a huge privilege. Of course, it happens to me sometimes. It happened to me in Swiss Cottage the other day. I was getting out of the train and up comes this beautiful young man who couldn't possibly have seen any of my performances live. With such an expression, with such a wonderful expression in his comments and in his manner and his behavior. I think, well, you know, this makes up for any sense of being a minority interest, so to speak, as we sometimes feel we are, from what you've just said. That kind of thing is a very special privilege, isn't it?
It is.
To feel that you've probably changed somebody's life in some small way.
Or in some big way, actually.
Or in some big way, yeah, sure.
Yeah, because we're a part of something that is powerful and healing.
Yes, it doesn't have to be stadiums and huge numbers of people. We probably never will, although the way you run your life, the way you expand your interest to this very thing of education, trying to bring people in and nourish them in that kind of way, I think you do to the most incredible degree. Maybe that is the way we should educate youngsters, that it just isn't getting onto a platform and pretending to be this, that, and the other.
Yeah, if it's not happening in the schools, we have to find the way to let it happen somewhere
else. It will.
Else.
Well, it is. It is new.
Thank you for sharing that, because that, as you say, it is an honor and a privilege to have that impact on somebody's life. And that will continue, those kind of impacts. Yeah. It might be a nice place to wrap up by taking one more look at a clip. This is from the wonderful biography about you called Full Circle. And we just have a clip from this.
If anyone were to ask me, has it been worth it, this career of mine, in terms of sacrifices, separations from family, struggling with nerves, being a public figure, public judgment, I would say no, it isn't worth it. But as a way of life, to be an artist is the most terrific privilege in the world, I think.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
I think we could talk for hours and hours more. This has been such a joy for me and a gift, again, and I'll never forget it. It's been wonderful to share it with all of you and you watching. And Dame Janet, thank you so much for giving us this pleasure of your insight.
We've shared something today.
Yes.
Shared it.
Yes.
We really have. Thank you.
My pleasure. Good night.